I am still sick, which is unfortunate, but I am going to do my best not to cough and make a video today anyway. So, in light of being sick, I once again am not going to be talking on the topic that I wanted to talk about last week. Instead, I am going to talk about habits, and this is inspired by how I was feeling last week, some of the things that I mentioned in my last video about being sick, but being pleasantly surprised at some of the healthy choices that I was able to make during that time, and how many of my habits I was actually able to maintain even while being sick. So, the theme of today's video on habits is how do you create habits that you can maintain even on your worst days? So, habit formation is hard in and of itself, but inevitably at some point, even when you have good habits going, life will get in the way. There will be things that derail you, that throw you off, that screw up your schedule, and it can be very hard to recover from that, to get back on track. It might feel like you're starting from scratch. Once again, all the progress you've made has gone out the window because you've lost your motivation or you've lost your momentum. So motivation and momentum are the two things that I'm going to throw some ideas around today. So firstly, when it comes to motivation, ideally trying to create habits that don't require motivation. So this is easier said than done, but one example of this would be to eliminate willpower. So last week when I was sick, I was craving junk food on certain days. And junk food is something that is not really a part of my life. It's something that, it's something that I've cut out of my diet for the most part. And yet on those days last week, I was still craving junk food. And I have rules around that, which help, but when you're sick, when you're not feeling well, and you're just craving junk food, it would be very easy to succumb and have junk food. And I did not succumb, and one of the main reasons for that was because I didn't have any junk food in the house. So there was no willpower needed to resist the temptation of eating junk food because I literally had no junk food to eat. So your environment plays a very big role in your habits. So if you can create environments that don't have those temptations, those triggers, then you don't need willpower at all. So the first example, eliminate willpower. Number two is something that I haven't actually tried myself, but I heard the other day, which was kind of interesting. So in case it helps someone else, I thought I'd throw it out there. And that is having the mindset that however you feel on your worst day, going to attempt that habit, make that your default mindset. So essentially, if you want to start a habit of going to the gym, think about the worst day that you won't have motivation, you won't have energy, you won't have time, you'll come up with all of these excuses. It'll be very easy to rationalize why you shouldn't go to the gym. It's going to be draining, it's going to be physically demanding, it's going to be something that you don't want to do. So if you take that feeling and have that as your baseline, that's your default, and your viewpoint is always, I'm going to hate this, basically, then that is built into the habit from the beginning. So you can't really go lower than that. So you can go higher than that. Maybe there's a day where you do have energy, you do feel like going to the gym, but you treat that as just a bonus. It's just a multiplier for the day. It helps. That's cool. But the baseline is basically, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So your default mindset is how you would feel on the worst day. Anything improved on that is just gravy on top, but basically you're just committing regardless of how you feel all the time, and that's just baked into the habit. So that's something that I don't think would really work for me, but it was an interesting thought that I came across recently, so I thought I would share. And next up we have momentum. So momentum is very, very helpful in maintaining your habits. If you miss one day, it's very easy to miss 2 days and then 3 days and fall off the wagon very quickly. So, how do you create habits where you don't lose your momentum? So, the first reason would be triggers that don't change. So, I'm having some trouble right now with creating habits around my bedtime routine. And a big reason why I'm having trouble is because my bedtime, the time that I start my bedtime routine changes based on my evening commitments. So some of my commitments, I'm not home at the time that I would like to start getting ready for bed to do my routine. And so that throws things off and makes sense why I'm having trouble with those habits, because it's tied to something that changes. It's helpful to attach habits to certain times of the day, but if that can be interrupted easily, then that's not the best strategy. So trying to tie your habits into things that don't change. So for me, that might look like having to move some things to the morning, where I can get up earlier and force myself to do those things before my day starts so that I know I can get those habits in. The other aspect of that would be trying to prioritize the habits for my bedtime routine. So if I get home late and I don't have time for all of those habits, I can still have my bedtime routine that feels like it's being done, but I am prioritizing sleep, for example, as my number one thing. So that means I have to get to bed at a certain time. So then whatever's on the bottom of the list, I'm going to pause for that day, still get the rest of my routine in, because my priority is getting to sleep on time. So prioritizing your habits, especially if you have a chunk of habits that you do all in one routine, trying to prioritize those so that you can maintain the habit overall. But yeah, trying to attach habits to triggers that don't change very much is helpful. The next example would be what I'm calling flexible habits. So if your goal is to go to the gym every Tuesday and Thursday after work, because those days you normally have off, it works in your schedule, then that's a great goal to have. Every Tuesday and every Thursday, go to the gym. But inevitably, something's going to come up on a Tuesday or a Thursday. So then what happens? Do you just skip the gym for that day? Probably. But what if you have a Tuesday and a Thursday thing, and then all of a sudden you've missed a whole week of the gym, and then the next week rolls around and you don't really feel like it? It's going to be harder to maintain. So trying to create flexible habits where, even if Tuesday and Thursday work for you for those days of the week, having the actual habit just be twice a week at the gym, minimum, twice a week. So ideally, you can have a consistent routine that will help solidify the habit Tuesday and Thursday, but factoring in that even if things come up on those days, you still want that habit. So you have to take that into account when you commit to other things. Okay, I'm going to have to go Wednesday and Friday this week, or Wednesday and Thursday, whatever. Just having flexibility built into the habit so that when other things come up, you can kind of rearrange your schedule and still maintain that threshold of twice a week going to the gym. The next up, we have modified habits. So the example from being sick last week I mentioned was I did not get my 10,000 steps in every single day when I wasn't feeling well. So that was disappointing for me, wanting to make it every single day of the year. But despite not being able to do that, I still went for a walk every single day. So while my goal every day was 10,000 steps, the modified habit was that I still went for a walk. Even on the worst day, even when I was sick, I can still manage a walk. It's not, the goal that I wanted of 10,000 steps, but I'm still going for a walk. And by still going for a walk, I'm maintaining that momentum, and so the habit itself is not ever compromised or lost. The habit is the daily walk, not the number of steps. And then lastly, I have what I'm calling the minimum viable habit. So essentially, you create a habit that you can do on your worst day from the start. And that is your threshold. That is your maximum of what is required. So let's say you want to do 20 push-ups every single day. Okay, you feel like doing it, it's going well. Then you hit a day where 20 just seems daunting. It seems overwhelming. Are you going to do it? Well, that's a lot. You might not. And then, again, you fall off track. You miss a day. It's very easy to get derailed and you've lost that momentum. But let's say your habit, your goal was 1 push-up every day. That is infinitely more manageable than doing 20 push-ups every day. So maybe you still want to do 20 push-ups every day, and you can, but your habit, your actual required daily push-up count is just 1. So creating the habit with the absolute minimum threshold that you can do every single day, even on your off days. So you're still maybe shooting for 20 every single day, but when it comes down to it, you have to do 1 every single day. That's the habit, is just 1. So anyways, those are some thoughts on creating habits that you can do even on bad days. Just keeping in mind whether you already have existing habits or you're thinking about starting new ones, to just play around with this thought of what actions would I be able to take even on my worst days, and trying to incorporate that into your current habits and your future habits. So habits is something that I am really interested in, something that I want to create a lot of content around in the future, ideally some courses and things like that. So it was nice to have a bit of a foray into that today, and I would love to hear your thoughts on habits in general. What kinds of things make it more difficult for you to form habits, or what kinds of things get in the way and derail you. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Anyways, I guess that's it for today. Thank you for joining me on this minimum viable habit of creating YouTube videos every week. So, even when I'm sick, I have created a low barrier to entry in making these videos, creating something that is sustainable, which has been great to get started creating videos. So thanks for being here, and I will see you next week. Ideally feeling better.